just joined, we will be recording starting now up until right before the Q&A, just so you're aware. So what I will do is start with a resource tour. Also, just a inclusion tip. You can see on my participant name that has my name and also my gender pronoun, she, her. So you can also rename yourself. You can hover over your name, click on more and rename, or you can go into your actual Zoom profile and add your pronoun after your last name in parentheses. So that's just a quick tip for folks who are already adding it to their signature lines. And then for others who have not met yet, met my staff, we also have folks from the office here. We have Kelly Purse, who is our program coordinator. She's there. And we have Janie Pinteritz, who is our DEI program manager. Okay, so I will share my screen, get started here. And for folks who have been used to coming to our brown bags, we start out typically with a resource tour of where you can find the information related to the topic we're talking about today. So if you start with the easiest page to start with, diversity.lbl.gov, go up to Ideas in Action. And here is where you'll find all of our training links, learning links, toolkits, Goodreads, etc. And for our specific discussion, you can go up to topics, go down to virtual teams, and this is the information here. So if you attended our brown bag in March, you'll remember actually we covered this toolkit around how to run inclusive and effective virtual meetings. And so for folks who remember that, you can click on that and take a look at some of the tips here and the steps related. And just want to thank those who attended that meeting because there were a lot of Zoom tips shared then at that time. And we were only week 1, I think, in shelter in place. Since then, we've expanded that idea of virtual meetings and now looking at virtual teams and how to think about inclusion in a virtual setting. And so if we're looking here, specifically at the left-hand side, you'll see the categories that we have listed. So, and thank you to Aditi and Learning and Organizational Development Group. She has been able to provide these remote work resources. So if you are a supervisor or manager, or if you're not a people leader and you're looking to learn a little bit more about onboarding to remote work, and you know, a lot of us has been doing this for several weeks now, but there's a couple of things here around virtual teams, around cultivating resilience through change, around managing virtual teams, etc. You can click on that link and it'll take you to some trainings as well. And of course, our Ergo team in Environment, Health and Safety Division actually held a brown bag on ergonomic tips and resources for telework. So you can click on that as well. And continuing down, our toolkits for virtual meetings. We have another one for Ergo guidelines and another one that shares external best practices for working remotely. So you can look at that. And then for supervisors, managers, and folks who are on search committees, we'll be discussing this later on during our session today around the communication charter to establish team norms around communications. And for those who are still doing video interviews, there's some best practices for hiring managers around doing that as well. So you can take a look at that. The discussion guide, well, we'll have Aditi go through, so I'll skip that for now. And then I'll just share a couple of other ones here. Some good reads here regarding working from home, and a couple of other tips regarding remote work culture that we found to be interesting, so you can take a look at those. 1 minute for idea. And some of you already know what this is with 1 minute for safety. When you start off a meeting and you give a couple of tips or information related to safety, we've copied that format and created 1 minute for idea. So the two that we have here, the first one is around inclusive and effective virtual meetings. So this is a lot of text, but this is just a snapshot in terms of sharing with your team some of the things to consider. And there's a longer PDF related to that. And we also have our 1 minute for safety, which is actually safety related to ergonomics and working remotely. So if you need that as a resource, you can click on that as well. And last but not least, some of you have taken a look at some of our information related to COVID-19 specifically. So there are additional resources for virtual teams specific to COVID-19. So we have Berkeley Lab's COVID-19 general website. We have remote work resources from IT. We have some HR guidance, FAQs from various groups, LinkedIn Learning resources and opportunities. And we also have a video here related to psychological safety, which we've been talking about since the fall. And finally, and this is also included in the other COVID websites, we have links to wellness resources. So if you click on self-care at home, so I'll just go through these. There are several drop-down links, and you can click on self-care at home and it'll drop down a couple of other resources here. Some of the videos were from our past webinars. So if you had a chance to check out Craig Mielkarski from the Be Well at Work Employee Assistance Program, these are some of the videos from the webinars that he's held. Additionally, community support, and there's several resources here as well, but it also links to some of those videos and also some wellness tools like calm.com that you might want to check out. A couple of other guides from Be Well at Work from our Employee Assistance Program. So again, if you haven't seen these, there's a couple of things here. This one, the last one you can see here is related to caregiving challenges. So that might be a resource that would be helpful for your teams as well. And then finally, external community resources for mental health. If you click on that, of course, we have our employee assistance program, but if you are looking for low cost / sliding scale community mental health resources in the local cities, there are a couple of other listings here that might be helpful. So please, and we do this tour really just so you know what's out there that we've put online for you, and feel free to share with your teams. So I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about the discussion guide, and I'll have Aditi take over from here. So as you know, we've put together several leader discussion guides, and primarily with the help of Janie on our team, who's really done a lot of curating and putting together these guides. The guides are really meant to hold a discussion with your team around certain topics. So we've had various discussion guides on accountability or equity, or even topics like microaggressions or bias. So this one is an exercise that Aditi will take you through. And then just to call out the 3 links here, and she'll go through this as well. The first one is the discussion guide. So it's really like an annotated agenda for what will happen. And if you are a leader, you can use this for your teams. Or if you're not a people leader, this is something that you can share with your manager as well as a resource. The second link here is the actual link to the exercise that the team members will go through. So Aditi will walk you through that. And finally, there is a communication charter for remote teams for team members to review and complete together. And this is part of the exercise in number 2, and it's module number 4. So this will make more sense later. But let me click on that, and you can see what that looks like. And this is something that the team will fill out, being that we are in a virtual environment and we're not sure how long we will be in this shelter in place, or we might be back in it later on if there's another sort of phase that we get into this. this will be important to set. And also to note, beyond shelter in place, there are team members who have remote folks on their teams, even though the team itself might not be fully remote. So this would be a good charter for folks to go through, just to set what those team norms are on how you'll communicate, collaborate, and work together effectively. So I will stop sharing my screen, and let me see if there are any questions in the chat so far. No? Okay, we're good to go. And thank you for those who just joined. For those who just joined, just a note, we are recording this session up until before the Q&A, the general Q&A at the very end. But it looks like we do have one hand up. And thank you, Laurel, for using the raise hand function. So we'll go ahead and go to Laurel before we get started on the discussion guide.
I chatted the question, but
we did. Okay, thanks.
I was just looking at the charter, and I'm wondering, is it too late now to do a charter with your team? Because we've already been working for a month remotely, and folks have been establishing patterns. So I feel like if I was to kind of swoop in and say, hey, let's do this charter, it just might be too late. That's all.
I would say it's not too late. And I think Aditi will talk a little bit more about that. We're kind of jumping a little bit forward. I would say it's not too late. And Aditi will give her point of view as well when we get to that section. But I think not only are you, if anything, just codifying, right? Like what it is you've already been doing, but you're also opening up the questions to things that you might have missed, right? So if you're sort of making assumptions that everyone is available at 4:30 for a happy hour, for example, as a team norm, maybe, folks didn't have an opportunity to weigh in on certain things, right? And so I think it's just an opportunity to have the dialogue to explicitly talk about this as a topic, rather than possibly making an assumption that folks have a general 8 to 5 schedule when we know that's not true, right? So that's all I'll say about that. But I will turn it over to Aditi, who will talk a little bit more. But thank you for the question, Laurel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lady. Hi, everyone. So happy to be joining this brown bag today. I can't echo enough Lady's sort of comments on just how exercises like the one I'm about to walk us through really help us make explicit some of the practices we might already have in place, codify the things that we might already have in our team culture or that we're building right now, but makes it clear where the gaps might be, or what practices are working for everyone or for certain individuals. So I guess I want to start by zooming out a moment to say that the discussion guide and the two exercises, both the charter and this short module on this Catalyst website, and I'll share in a moment. All of it's, the intention behind it is to help us build inclusive team cultures as we transition and normalize this remote work, as Lady was saying. And culture building can be really amorphous, but really the textbook definition of that is the shared norms, values, practices that we use to guide our individual behaviors and our relationships on a team or in any group. And so this exercise is really to help you all, if you're a people leader or as a member of a team contributing to this exercise, helps you all name the things that you want to incorporate into your team cultures as they grow and as we get more used to this remote environment we're in. Okay, so let me, with that, share my screen here. Thank you for bearing with me. Are we good? Okay. So this is the leader discussion guide, again, from the discussion guide section on the Ideas in Action website. So I'm clicking on this number 1 here. And you see it's laid out pretty intuitively. We're starting with the purpose to really help you serve as an ambassador for IDEA. The length of this meeting, this discussion, is 60 minutes. And the objective I just went through, but specifically it's to discuss some of these topics that are listed here at the bottom: future of work, leading with inclusion, focusing on relationships, intentional communication, and what that looks like in practice for your team. As a facilitator of this discussion, we ask that you review this guide to really get familiar with what this discussion will entail, and then simply schedule the meeting, send out some pre-work, which is this link to this Catalyst sort of module that I'll take us through quickly momentarily, and then have certain things handy, including this guide for the meeting itself. So the communication charter will be one of the materials you'll have handy as a facilitator, or if again, you aren't the people manager, but want to potentially be able to co-facilitate this with your manager or who's leading this discussion, it'll help you to know this guide well. So quickly walking us through the actual agenda of this discussion, the 60 minutes, you'll have sent this pre-work. Individuals will have dedicated about 15 to 20 minutes on this activity, which is, you can see on the screen here, this is what you'll have sent as pre-work. So this is hosted by Catalyst, an organization that focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. And it quickly goes through these topics: future of work, leading with inclusion, focus on relationships, intentional communication, and then a quiz to kind of have folks practice what they've gone through. So I won't go through each of these, but maybe I'll just focus. Oh, okay, it does let me click into it. But in the end, after you've gone through these different modules that are fairly quick, some have video content, some have just little cards for you to click through, then you will go through this quiz, sort of picking out the practices or norms that we have just learned are markers of inclusion on remote teams. So you'll go through that. I took it actually several times, and I did make some errors. So even, sort of learning what might work, or I also had some feedback for the quiz. So these are all things that your team members may come across as they go through the quiz themselves. And maybe in your pre-work to them or email communication, you can let them know that if they have thoughts or feedback for things that come up, to record that and bring it to the meeting. And then you'll essentially, in terms of the meeting itself, you'll start, dedicate 5 minutes to just go over the fact that these are our objectives. This is what you've done so far through the pre-work. You'll also, a good inclusion practice is naming roles. So who is the facilitator? This is the third bullet here. Explain your role as the facilitator. You will be the person leading the discussion, ensuring team member participation, and managing time. But then there are also some other roles that are important in inclusive remote meetings in particular. One is having someone who's tracking the conversation, so the scribe or note taker, or whatever you'd like to call them, but person who's tracking discussion points, action items, making sure that the notes are accessible to the team, and then having someone who's a chat monitor. So 5 minutes quickly, just orienting ourselves to the objectives and our roles, and then we move into some of the work and the discussion. So you'll dedicate 25 minutes to go through the communication charter, which in the pre-work, as Lady had said, it falls under this module 4, intentional communication. We'll just click into that momentarily. So in the pre-work, individuals will have read through some of the elements that cause miscommunication, and then we'll have looked through this activity, looked through what a team charter is and just what a template of the team charter activity will look like. And so you will go through that together. Let me click into it, freezing a little bit. Okay. So this is what you'll dedicate 25 minutes to. And this is the piece that's really important to codify again, even though you've been working remotely for a month now almost, to make sure that the hours, the communication etiquette, the norms during meetings, and the ways in which you're building community, the technology you're using, all of these pieces are ones that you as a team have discussed and have made explicit so that everybody is on the same page. And what I recommend while you're going through this together is being critical of the things that are on the screen too. For instance, some things may not necessarily be the way you want to communicate. So are we always responding promptly to our teammates, or what does prompt, let's define what prompt means under communication etiquette. Does that mean within the hour, or does that mean within a reasonable amount of time, and we'll have a conversation if we feel that that's not being met. But that's really what this part of the discussion is about. So we'll dedicate 25 minutes to checking off the things you are doing and then discussing the things that might be missing here. At 25 minutes-ish in this meeting, you'll move to talking about the pre-work exercise as a whole. So you've now established a charter, you've talked about some of the norms and practices that you already do or that you feel are important for your team. And then you're going to talk more broadly about your norms as a team overall, really pulling from that pre-work. So which of the behaviors and actions in this exercise, so really actually drawing from that quiz that we were looking at earlier, what are the behaviors and actions that most resonate with you? Which of these would we most like to commit to bringing to our team? So in addition to the charter, what are some other practices we want to bring in? And then when we're talking about inclusion, the real question is, who are we designing for? Are we designing for all of the individual needs on our team? And who might we have not been thinking about? So based on the behaviors and actions we've reviewed in this exercise, what are some of the practices, norms, rituals we might set up as a team to make remote work engaging for everybody on the team? So that's question number 3 here in the discussion. And some examples of that could be setting up water cooler hangouts, implementing a norm to check in with how everyone's feeling before getting down to business in a meeting, etc. And you can get creative here, and as a facilitator, encourage your team to play with what we've seen elsewhere that's worked, that we'd like to try. So that's all space for we want to make space for that in this discussion. The 4th question is, now that we've talked about some of these actions, practices that we want to bring to our team, a lot of that pulling from our pre-work, but also other examples we've seen in the world, let's talk about whether these practices can be designed to suit the broader needs of our team. So different people on our team, how might it work so that we can be inclusive of as many people or everybody on our team as possible? So taking into consideration family responsibilities, other physical, mental needs, life circumstances. So some questions you might ask your team here are, how might we design some of the things we just named in the previous question to suit everybody? An example would be, the water cooler chats, or even the hangouts that we might be having. Can we have them at different times, rotating it so that people who have different limitations schedule-wise can attend some rather than having to miss the entire series overall? That's just one example. And then finally, we can't have a meeting and discussion like this without really getting concrete about action items and next steps. So what are our next steps? You may find that, 25 minutes, you might want to be more pointed with these questions. You might decide that you want to add a little bit more time to have a follow-up meeting. That's up to you, but really spend the last 5 minutes wrapping up, recapping what the next steps are. And a beautiful practice here is extending appreciation to a colleague who shared a comment or a suggestion during the meeting that inspired them or that resonated with them. So having, as a facilitator, sort of making that possible. And I think that is all, Lady. I'll pass it back to you. Obviously invite questions, but I'll stop sharing
thank you so
now.
much, Aditi.
Of course.
Very helpful overview of the discussion guide and the charter and the website. So we'll go ahead and stop recording here, and we'll go ahead